Hey guys, Space Marine 658 here. Today we're going to be going through the real meat and potatoes of our quest system, in that we're going to walk through how to actually set up the objective tracking and also triggering quests completed, additional quests, and things like that. So what we're going to want to do is go ahead and first thing you want to do is I've created another actor component. So all you got to do is go up here, new blueprint script component. And all I've done is it's just a regular old actor component. And I've called it actor component quest tracker. Now the reason for this is we're going to actually remove this little bit here. All I've done is I've just removed it from begin play. So none of this actually ever gets triggered. And we're going to actually set this up to run dynamically. So what we're going to want to do is go into our quest system. Now what we're going to want to do is a couple of things. You're going to want a handful of variables here at the start. And so what we're going to do is call this our starting quests. You could have more than one. And then we're going to also have our active quest. This will only have one. You could in theory have multiple depending on how you want to do it. For me though, having one single active quest at a time makes it a little easier as far as triggering listeners and things like that. Now that's not to say they won't have other quests available, but they only currently one activated quest. And we're going to have available quests. And then I'd say probably completed quests. Now with this, there's a couple of things. We're going to want to turn on our starting quests so that way we can set those up when the player is created. All right. As you can see here, I changed a few of these variables over to arrays. So basically, only our active quests we really want to be a single item. Starting quests, available quests, and completed quests are all going to be multiple. So if you can go ahead and change those over to arrays, those will be useful. Now let's go ahead and work on some functions here to really add into these. So the first one is going to be an add quest. Now in theory, you could have this be something that takes in an array, but I think in my mind, most of the time, my quests I'm only going to add at a time. You go talk to somebody like an NPC, they give you a quest. You're not going to be adding a ton of quests at a time. So worst case scenario, if you have to add a couple of nodes of add quest, add quest, add quest, let's say you add 3 at a time, it's not that bad. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take in a quest of that structure type. And this is going to add it to our available quests. So we can go ahead and do add unique, and we're going to take in that quest. One thing we're going to want to also do is probably, maybe not now, but in the future, we're going to want to trigger something based on when the quest gets added to the player, right? Maybe you want UI notification to pop up when that happens. So what you can do is a couple of things. First, I want to break this off. And let's actually create an event dispatcher, and we'll call this quest added. And we're going to give it a signature. We can keep it the S quest, and we'll call it the quest added. And then we'll call this here. And what we can do is we can plug this in and plug in the in quest. Now, there's a couple different things we could do with these tags and things. But since right now we're not too worried about, doing any checks or anything, we'll leave it here for now. But we'll leave this here when we come back to it later. Now, another thing we want to do is actually activate a quest. Now, the way we're going to want to do this is basically if there are no quests, which actually we can do that right now. If there are no quests on the player, why don't we go ahead and just activate a quest? So if a quest gets added, we're going to get the active quest, and we're basically going to check what's the best way to check this? So there's a few different ways to check if structs are empty. What I find, in my opinion, is the easiest thing to do is just check if the tag is equal to none. Because if that's true, then we can just go ahead and add the quest, because that means that there is no quest currently existing. Another thing you can do is there's a few I'm trying to remember where they're at. So there's a few different ways to just check basically of is this struct exist. But this to me is one of the simpler ways to do that. So if it is equal to none, so basically there is no current quest, then we're going to go ahead and set the new quest as the active quest. So we can do is, if this is true, then we'll set the active quest as the end quest. And we're going to also, actually, we're not going to actually set it here. What we're going to do is we're going to call the function activate quest. Now the activate quest, we're going to take in the actual quest that we're going to activate. So quest to activate. And then we'll come back here and we'll plug this in here and take our end quest. So what we can actually do, a cool thing, if you don't know this, rather than dragging a line all the way over here, which, you know, for something short like this isn't going to be too ugly, but can get ugly the longer your function is, you can actually do get end quest, and this actually pulls that local function, or sorry, local variable over to here. As you can see, they actually added tooltips and stuff here. So this is a function parameter. All right. So we've gone ahead, and if there isn't an active one, we make this one active. And then over here, what we're going to want to do is on this quest activate, there's a couple things we're going to want to do. Right. So we want to listen to the objectives. We want to listen for when those are done. Now, depending on how your game is, if you have unique objectives, you may want to listen to a couple, or you may want to refresh it every time. I'm going to do this in such a way that you can have unique objectives, or you can have shared objectives. For example, like objectives that maybe you complete for a different quest. Now, the problem with this is by doing it in this way, if you complete a unique objective and deactivate the quest and activate a different quest, it will reset that progress. But I think that should be fine for the most part. What this allow you to do is do like repeat quests and things like that. There are a few ways you can have, in theory, as an example, right? We could have objectives, right? We'll have completed objectives. I need to change this actually to a gameplay tag. If I can spell today. Gameplay tag container. Instead of array, it needs to be a single. We'll compile that. So this could be our, you know, we'll have completed objectives. And that could be used to store, you know, things that are unique versus things that are, you know, only for this specific quest. Do you want it to be tracked versus, like, you know, for example, if you have a quest where it's kill 100 zombies and you have another quest that maybe has killed 200 zombies. Well, if you complete the quest and let's say they share the same tag, whatever, for the objective, you don't want that tag from the 100 zombies to complete the 200 zombies, right? So you want that one to get wiped. So you'll probably want a completed objectives and then a historical objectives or something like that. Or we'll call this like completed unique objectives. That's what we'll call it. Completed unique objectives. And so the cool thing is by having these, we can then track what quests have been completed and refresh those. So how do we actually get to that point, right? So the quests we're wanting to activate, we're going to break out here. Now we've got a few different things. Since we're going to be activating it, that means we're going to be setting our active quest to this. So if we go ahead and do this, we can just set that here. So tell it, here's what our active quest is. In which case we actually just pull off of here and do this. Now we have our required quest, link quest. There are some error checking we can do here, which we'll do in another video about required quests and link quests. But for now, we're going to focus on our objectives. So now we want to get all our objectives, right? So we're going to do break gameplay tag container. Now what we want to do is for each of these objectives, we're going to want to set up a listener. So let's go ahead and do a for each loop. Plug that in here. Now, oops. One problem you may notice here is, you know, okay, so we've got our quests and everything going, but how do we add a tag for each one? So what we want to do to actually add a listener for each one of these is like how we did earlier in the get player pawn and get component by class. We're basically going to do basically the same thing where we just add a listener, but we're going to add an event that we can then deactivate as needed. So for each of these gameplay tags, we're going to create a listener and we're going to create an event. So go ahead and create an event. And we're going to create a matching event. We're going to have to move this out into the event graph here in a second, but we'll just call this objective complete, because it's the objective listener. Now, in theory, you could have a, as you can see here, it errors out because it shouldn't be in this kind of graph. You probably could add some things to check if the objective was failed versus completed. But for our purposes, like, you'll only ever get the tag if you actually complete the objective. So I'm not super worried about that. All right. So now we've got the objective complete event here for each of these listeners. Now what we want to do is basically when the tag gets added, we're going to want to do a couple things here. So depending on if it's a unique objective or not, we'll determine how we add these. Now the question is, how do we know which of these are unique, right? So let's go ahead and take a look. If we're thinking about how do we store our unique objectives, what I would say is there's a couple options. We could have a separate unique objectives container, and the benefit of doing it that way is that you can make sure that they are separate from the regular objectives. Now that does make it harder, because then you've got to worry about a whole separate container within your quest struct. But I do think in this instance, since we are using them as unique, meaning that they're going to be stored historically, I think there's some benefit to setting it up that way. So let's go to our quest system here and open up our struct, and we'll just add another gameplay tag container. And we'll hit save. And this is going to be our unique objectives. And so we only really need to worry about this when it comes to specifically dealing with adding objectives. So what we can do is in here, let's go ahead and we're going to want to break this one as well. And basically, we're going to want to kind of copy this same sort of functionality, except we're going to have to add a little bit here, so that way we can track when these unique ones get added, right? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add a listener as well. And the gameplay tag. And these are going to be, we're going to create another event, but a separate event. So let's go back here and let's actually just duplicate this, and we'll rename this to be our unique events. Unique objective. If I can spell today at all, even in the slightest, completed. Now, if we come back here, that should let us select it here. Yep. Just has to match the signature. All right. So as you can see here, so now we've set it up so that initially we come in and we check for all of the objectives, and then we check for all the unique objectives. Now, if it has none, of course, it won't add a listener, because there won't be anything to add a listener for. But what we want to do is for the unique objectives, we're going to want to add those to the completed unique objectives. So let's get that. And we're probably going to want to also add it to the complete objectives. So the difference here is going to be when we activate a quest, we're going to check for completed unique objectives that match the existing objectives. And we're going to want to make sure that those are then added back into the completed objectives. Because when we finish a quest, we're basically going to wipe the completed objectives because they're done. So let's go ahead and when we come in here, right, then what we want to do is before we add a listener here, we want to check, does the completed unique objective already exist? So we just do has tag, and we want to do an exact match for this tag. If it does have that exact match, then instead of having a listener, which we're going to only want to do on false, we're going to actually just have these complete objectives and add that tag. This way, for any of our quests that we have that have unique objectives, things that can only be done the once, that way when we activate and deactivate, they don't get wiped. We can do this. And the cool thing is, since we've set it up this way, if you want to make all of your quests unique, you could also do that as well, but you just got to be more aware of what tags could hit other tags. All right. And so now we've got our completed and unique. So let's go ahead and just go here, and what we're going to do is add gameplay tag. And in fact, okay, yeah. Some things let you add multiple to the same function. This one does not. So what we're going to do is tag change is going to be our incoming tag. So this will do enough for the unique, and then for the non-unique, we can just grab this and put it here. Now what we want to do is we want to then go ahead and remove the listener, so that way we're no longer listening to a quest we no longer, or objective we no longer need to be listening to. Remove listener. And we want to do gameplay tag to listen for and the event to remove, which I do need to reword that. That should be said slightly differently on the text here. So we'll do that here in a second. All right. So let's actually go back here, and this shouldn't be tagged to listen for. This should be tagged to remove. It's a little more accurate, and that'll help. Updating things like this will help with anyone working on the game alongside you, so they understand what's going on. It seems like a little thing, but a little thing like that could really cause some confusion. All right. So we've gone ahead, we've added our gameplay tag that we've completed, and we've removed a listener. Now what we want to do is at the end of either of these, which in fact it could be the same function, is we want to call an event to actually check if we've completed our quest. Are all objectives completed? So let's go ahead and just create a function. It goes check objectives completed. And we're actually going to do something so that this can be reused for other things. So we're actually going to output a float. Would probably be the best. Actually, let's do an integer, and we'll do another integer, and we'll have objectives remaining, and we're going to have objectives total. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to call this type of function in things like our UI elements. So whenever these dispatchers get called, we could call basically this function and say, hey, how many objectives are remaining, and things like that. So what we want to do is, so our active quests, we want to get that and break out and get this. And what we can do is we can get a count. I believe there's a specific wording we have to get here. Yeah, get num gameplay tags in container. So this is going to be get num for both. And we're going to add these together. And this is our objectives total. Now to get the objectives remaining, what we basically got to do is then get our completed objectives, get completed objectives, get unique objectives. And this one's going to require a little bit more math. So we're going to actually kind of double layer here. We're going to have a function within a function. So let's go and create this function. Here we go. Collapse to function, and we'll call this one get completed quest, or sorry, objective. I keep saying quest for some reason. Objective count, and we're actually make this a pure function. Cool thing about pures is they make it a little bit easier to use them in a more streamlined way. They're a little cleaner. You don't have to have pins in one side and pins in the other. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get that same num. Just Control C, Control V, and do this. So let's get the complete objective count, and we're gonna add these together. Call a return and plug that in there. If we go back here, so now what we got is, so we got our total, and we want to minus from our total the completed amount. So go here and do this. In fact, to make that a little less ugly, let's do this. There we go. All right. So now what's happening is we're going in and we're checking if our objectives are completed, and we're returning our objective total and our objectives remaining. Now this just returns these numbers to help us, show some UI and things like that. But also what we can do is we can check here if this is equal to 0. Because if 0 are remaining, that tells us that we actually have completed all of our objectives. And if so we'll say objectives complete. So ideally, this will hit 0, and we'll trigger that, and that'll tell us, hey, we completed all of our possible objectives. So let's go back here to the main graph. We'll do get complete objective count. Oh, wrong one. Whoops. Get objectives completed. And that will tell us, did we complete this quest? Now, if so, then we want to trigger off something saying, hey, we've completed this quest. But before we do that, let's go ahead and test all of this, because we've done an awful lot of coding and not a lot of testing yet, right? And you want to test often in case you've made mistakes or if there's any errors there. So let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're going to plug this in. This will just tell us if we completed the quest. And so how do we test this, right? So we've got our add quest, which what it'll do is the first quest you add, it's going to activate, right? So let's go to our player, and on begin play, let's grab our quest tracker. And for now, we've got starter quests, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to say add quest. And for our in quest, let's go ahead and we're probably going to want to grab our, our list of quests. So let's go and take a look at our game instance. And we can probably add a function, and we will add some functionality here about getting quests and stuff. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this quest over, and we'll do a make quest, and it should, here, let's just promote. So, whoops, wrong thing. Let's just promote the quest itself to a variable, and we'll just call this temp, because we're only using this to test out the functionality. And if we paste that in, we should get all of our things here. Now for this first one, we don't have any unique objectives, but our objective is to pick up a weapon. And we've got our linked quests and things like that, but we're not too worried about that. So ideally, the way this will work is we'll add the quest. It'll come in here. It'll check if there's any unique quests, and it'll add it to the available. And then it's going to call this binding to just say, hey, quest was added. We check if we have an active, which we should not have any active. It'll say none here. And then it's going to go and it's going to set it as the active quest. And that's just going to go in, set as active, and then grab the information from here and add some listeners. So the cool thing is this should just work out of the box. So now if we come up here, sure, which means we completed the objectives. So if we go back here, now that we know that this is working, so we've added our quest and it's being completed, right? So now what we need to do is go here. So now we know the quest successfully completed. So now the question is, what's next? What do we want to do to make sure that we can carry on? Well, if all the objectives are completed, that means the quest is completed, which means we need to make sure we add the quest to the completed list, but that we also remove that quest from the current active quest. So let's create a function and we'll call this quest completed. Now the cool thing is, since we're activating one quest at a time, we don't need to worry about, having 5 different quests that could be running all at the same time. We're only worried about the current active quest. So if we've completed the quest, we're going to want to go to our active quest, and first we'll probably set that, but first let's actually make sure completed quest. Here we go. So get complete quest, and we're going to want to add unique, and we're going to add our current active quest to it before we wipe it out. And I'm not going to add it here, but we're going to add a note for ourselves here. And this is where we're going to actually add our check for linked quests. What this will do is it'll basically go, hey, do we have any linked quests? If so, add that linked quest up next to our available quests. So for example, if you have to complete quest 1 to get quest 2, that can be done here as well. So we're going to want to do that. And we're also going to want to go into our available quests, and we're going to want to find and actually remove the array element that is this active quest. So let's do find. And when we find it, we want to do remove. We don't need to worry about item, just index. Remove index. And what this will do is this will actually clear out that quest from the available quests. And then we should be able to then set here. Let me actually just remove this real quick. But yeah, here's where we want to do that check. All right, so we've cleared out our active quest and all of this. Let's actually go, and what we should be able to do is if we have this set to visible, yeah. So as you can see here, we have our available, we have our active. Let's actually go ahead and in game, you can actually, the cool thing with this is we can actually see these in game. So if we go to our player here, let me search player. Oh, I forgot. They call it something else in the blueprint, right? First person character, yeah. First person character. This dang map thing keeps filling up all the space. All right. So one cool thing for debugging, right, is when you are wanting to take a look at, what tags do you have, what quests have been completed. There's a couple of things. If you make them visible, you should be able to see here. Let's go ahead and take a look. Why can't we see these? If we go in here, because our starting quests are visible, but the rest of these look to be hidden, right? Yeah. So let's stop this and let's go here just so we can see what's going on. Let's open up these. And that should let us then see them in game. Grab this. Okay, our quest tracker. Yeah. So you can see here, we have our different things here. We have 2 available quests. So we got the empty quest and the quest 1. Now, this empty one, it probably can be removed. There's some things we can do. That's just by default, for some reason, when you have an empty quest array, it adds that there. It's not going to interfere with anything. but you could always do some stuff to remove it. But for now, we're not worried about that. So we have quest 1, as you can see here, and it's got the image and all of the different things here. But as you can see here, we have that as the active quest as well, because we set it as the active quest if you don't have an active quest. But we have no completed objectives or completed unique, and we have no completed quests. So if we go and we walk up, we've got our weapon. As you can see here, we've got our completed objectives. We tab over, that way I can have my mouse back. But you see here, the active quest hasn't yet been completed. We got these complete objectives, and it fired off that true earlier, but we didn't actually fire off that quest removal, right? So let's go ahead and go in here into our quest tracker. So now that our quest has been completed, right? So what we want to do is have a branch and have it come off, and when true, so our objective's completed, then we want to fire off our quest completed, and we'll want to do the same here. Now the cool thing is, since we did set this up to actually work with checking both the unique and the regular, then we know that this will work even if you have only all unique or only all regular or some combination thereof. So now if we do the exact same thing, so we go look at our first person character, we go look at our quest tracker, we should see our active quest here in just a second. As we can see, you probably already saw it, the array element went down because that is no longer an available quest. And it's our complete quest went up because now it's in our completed quests. And you see here we have our completed objectives. Now what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to wipe out that complete objective, because if we ever got a quest again that had that same pickup weapon, it would fail here, right? Or it would auto complete technically, depending on how things trigger. Technically it probably wouldn't up until you pick up. If it had multiple objectives, if you picked up another objective, so let's say it had 2 objectives, it would actually fail or succeed when you picked up the secondary objective, even though you hadn't actually done the first objective. Now we want to leave the complete unique objectives, of course, because that's our unique ones. We want to leave unique objectives there because there's things we're going to probably save in our save file and things like that. So what we'll want to do is this complete objective, we're going to actually want to clear out this. So what we can do is we can grab our complete objectives, and then we can actually clear out the tags, or I believe there's a way to remove all of the tags. Let me do something real quick. All right, yeah. Sorry, I swore there was a function, but actually it's even easier than a function. You can just call set complete objectives to empty. So now when we complete it, we should see that it should empty out the completed objective here. So we'll probably see it blip to show that we got it, and then boom, as you can see, it's empty. But yeah, that'll be it for today. That's about the full length of the video. If you have any more questions or anything over what we've gone over today, definitely let me know down below. Next episode, we're probably going to cover setting up starting quests, as well as probably start looking at some UI elements and what we're going to do as far as selecting quests and things like that. Depending on how long that all takes us, we may also look at required quests and linking quests. That way we can make sure that we're triggering things in a way that makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I know the normal YouTuber stuff, but otherwise, good luck and good hunting.